Codes, standards, and best practices. These are the foundation of any particular project. So let us try to understand what we need to know, what we need to understand about these three terms. So let us first look at standards. Standards are nothing but these are the documents which are prepared by professional societies or communities, right? Which contains mandatory requirements. So whenever we are starting any project, we should follow some standards so that we know what we have done in other project, what others have done in other projects. So we have to standardize few things. So these professional societies or committees, they prepare these documents. At the same time, if anybody says that we are compliance with the standard, that doesn't mean that they are immune from legal obligations. So what we are trying to say, we have standards with us, we are following these practices. At the same time, if we are following all these requirements mentioned in the standard, still we are liable for any mistake. Okay. At the same time, if you look at the code, code is a group of general rules or systematic procedures. Okay, we'll try to understand how what is code and how it is different from standard. First, let us try to understand what is code. It is group of general rules and systematic procedures. What these rules are for? These are for design, fabrication, installation, and inspection that are adopted by legal jurisdiction. Okay, and made into law. This term is really very important when we are talking about code. Okay, when we are saying we are following this code or somebody has to follow that code, for example 31.3, ASME 31.3 is a code. Okay, if we have to follow, we are saying we are following ASME 31.3, we are saying all the rules which are there, we are following those. Okay, all rules, all procedure, all clauses with respect to design, fabrication, installation shall be followed. If not, then you are legally bound. Okay, somebody can say you, somebody can take legal action if those rules and systematic procedures are not followed. Okay, so codes, what are they are intended to set forth the engineering requirements deemed necessary for safe design and construction of piping installation. Why we are so strict, why the legal action can be taken, legal jurisdiction and laws are involved, because we want a safe design. Okay, all piping systems shall be safe design and construction of piping installation. Main intent is to provide the necessary safety. Required safety has to be there, that has to be ensured. That is why these group of rules and systematic procedure has to be followed. A code as a force of law. Okay, unlike standards. So now let us try to compare it with standards. There are also laws, there are also there are also rules which have been prepared by professionals who are working in the same field since many years. But how this is different from code? Here the law is there, but in case of standards, law is not there. We don't have the force of law in case of standards, which are voluntarily accepted guidelines. Okay, we are doing similar project or same project in different locations, or maybe few of the conditions are different, but still similarity will be there. So general practices are established in the form of standards with the help of professionals who are working in the same field. So these are voluntarily accepted guidelines. Okay, there is no force of law involved, but becomes mandatory only when incorporated in a business contract. Suppose somebody is hiring, a client is there who is hiring an engineering contractor, he says we have to follow these standards. Okay, then only these standards has to be followed. This, once it becomes a part of business contract, then those becomes standard. Okay, once we are mentioning that we are following, we are going to follow the code, then this is legal, you are bounding them legally. So legal jurisdiction and laws will be involved. This is a major difference between code and standard. Now let us look at recommended practices. Recommended practices are documents prepared by professional group of communities or committee indicating good engineering practice but which are optional. Okay, we talked about code where law is involved. We talked about standards which are voluntarily accepted guidelines but mentioned in the business contract also. At the same time, we have few recommended practices where the documents, the practices have been established by professional group or committees, but these are only optional. These are good practices. This may or may not add additional safety, which we were talking with respect to code and standard. And at the same time, we generally we try to find out such practices so that the design is safe, design is standard, design is understood by other professionals also. So whatever best practices others are following, if we are also following in the same in our current project, then this will be called as recommended practices, thumb rules. Companies also develop their own recommended practices in order to have consistency. Okay, so suppose there are many professionals who are working in some project and they quit their job and they join somewhere else and they try to work in that environment and they find similar practices, then this will help them also to implement the requirements, to implement the necessary safety guidelines, to implement the practices. So it will add consistency into the projects and it will avoid having one project differ substantially from other. So you will find similar best practices, recommended practices which were followed in many projects. So these are only optional. These are standard accepted guidelines once it is mentioned in the business contract. Okay, and these are legally, anybody can legally challenge if these are not followed. At the same time, standards are prepared by professional societies and committees, but there is no legal foundation. At the same time, we have to follow these standards also. So these are the basic differences between codes, standards, and best practices.